Hi students, in this video I am just going to share some of the inputs about interpersonal communication, as well as I'll tell you how to develop your interpersonal communication. Okay, so before that we'll see what is interpersonal communication, okay, and what are the common elements of interpersonal communication, okay, how the interpersonal communication process takes place. So we'll see one by one in detail. Okay, yes. First, what is interpersonal communication means? Actually, it's a process by which people exchange information, feelings, and meaning through verbal as well as non-verbal messages. In simple, we can say that it is face-to-face communication. Okay. And these kind of interpersonal communication is not just about what is actually said, okay, and the language used, but how it is said and the non-verbal messages sent through tone of voice, facial expressions, gestures, and body language. Clear? When two or more people are in the same place and they are aware of each other's presence, then communication takes place, no matter how subtle or unintentional, right? Without speech, an observer may be using cues of posture, facial expression, and dress to form an impression of others' role, emotional state, personality, and or intentions. Okay, although no communication may be intended, people they receive messages through such forms of non-verbal behavior, right? Okay, so we can say that just interpersonal communication is not just about what is actually said, the language used, but how it is said and the non-verbal messages sent through tone of voice, facial expressions, gestures, and body language. Okay, and many research has been done to try to break down interpersonal communication into a number of elements in order that it can be more easily understood. Commonly, these elements include, okay, let's see what are they. So these are the common elements of interpersonal communication. Okay, the one is communicators, second is message, and the third one is noise, and the fourth one is feedback. An important one is context and channel. Okay, so what is these elements of interpersonal communication? We have a question. Okay, let us see in little bit detail. Okay, so this is interpersonal communication process. Okay, in which you could see the communicators. Here, who are the communicators? The sender and receiver are the communicators, right? So what through the channel, what has been transferred from sender to receiver, message has been transferred, right? Similarly, from the receiver side, the feedback, it can be either in verbal as well as non-verbal. Okay, so this is the exact process of interpersonal communication. Clear? See, I told you that the sender can be, the communicators can be senders and receiver. See, for any communication to occur, there must be at least two people involved. We know that, right? It's easy to think about communication involving a sender and receiver of a message. However, the problem with this way of seeing a relationship is that it presents communication as a one-way process where one person sends the message and the other receives it, right? While one person is talking and another is listening. For example, in fact, communications are almost always complex because it's a two-way process with people sending and receiving messages to and from each other simultaneously at the same time, right? In other words, we can say that this communication is an interactive process. Clear? While one person is talking, the other is listening. But while listening, they are also sending feedback in the form of smiles, head nods, etc. through body gestures, likewise, right? Okay, so this is what we can say that communicators okay, and it's one of the important element in the interpersonal communication, right? And the second one is message. Message not only means the speech used or information conveyed, okay, but also the non-verbal messages exchanged, such as facial expression, tone of voice, gestures, and body language. Clear? You know, the non-verbal behavior can convey additional information about the spoken message also, okay. In particular, you see, it can also reveal more about emotional attitudes which may underlie the content of speech, okay. And another important element is noise, okay. You know, noise, which has a special meaning in communication theory. It refers to anything that distorts the main message, so that what is received is different from what is intended by the speaker, okay. For example, noise, that is background sounds or a low flying jet plane, can also interfere with communication. Other factors are considered to be noise because the use of complicated jargon, inappropriate body language, and some inattention by showing disinterest and cultural differences can also be considered noise in the context of interpersonal communication, okay. In other words, simply we can say that any distortions or inconsistencies that occur during an attempt to communicate can be seen as noise, okay. And the last important element is feedback. Another important element of interpersonal communication is feedback, okay, because it consists of message the receiver returns, which allows the sender to know how accurately the message has been received, as well as the receiver's reaction, okay. The receiver may also respond to the unintentional message as well as the intentional message. You know, there are types of feedback range from direct verbal statements, for example, say that again, I don't understand, to subtle facial expressions or changes in posture that might indicate to the sender that the receiver feels uncomfortable with this message, okay. So this kind of feedback, you know, which allows the sender to regulate, to adapt, or to repeat the message in order to improve communication. Clear? So all these elements of that is interpersonal communication is very important, okay. And one more important thing is, I'll tell you about how to develop your interpersonal communication skill, okay. You know, before I'll tell you how to develop the interpersonal communication skill, another important element in this interpersonal communication process is context and channel, okay. So what is context? You know, all communication is influenced by the context in which it takes place. Am I right? Yes. However, apart from looking at the situational context of where the interaction takes place, for example, in a room, office, or perhaps outdoors, the social context also needs to be considered. For example, the roles, responsibilities, and relative status of the participants, etc. Okay, so this kind of the emotional climate and participants' expectations of the interaction will also affect the communication. So, okay, the context is very important thing in interpersonal communication process. Another thing is channel. It refers to the physical means by which the messages transfer from one person to another. This concept is very known to everybody, right? Because in face-to-face context, you know, these channels which are used or either speech or vision. So, however, during a telephonic conversation, you know, the channel is limited to speech alone. Whereas in face-to-face communication, the context, that means the channel which are used are speech and vision. Okay, so when you have the opportunity to observe some interpersonal communication, just make a mental note of the behaviors used, both verbal as well as non-verbal. Okay, so in the next video I'll clearly explain about how to develop the interpersonal skill in detail. Thanks for listening.